The Qing Dynasty, the last of Imperial China, was the largest dynasty in Chinese history. It was led by the Manchus, an ethnic group formed in 1635 on the basis of the by then unified Jurchens of Manchuria. Through its duration spanning almost 300 years, the dynasty achieved China's greatest territorial extent, and at its peak during the 18th century, it was one of the most powerful forces on earth. The High Qing era saw major economic and population growth, and by its end, China was home to more than 400 million people. During the 19th century, the Qing dynasty faced numerous threats by encroaching external powers, and was inflicted by disastrous crises and uprisings. As with many of China's dynasties before it, the Qing government's mismanagement of hurdles in its later years, as well as the dynasty's reluctance to adopt modern weaponry, may well have led to its downfall, culminating in the Xinhai Revolution in 1911, and the end of the Qing dynasty. With all the talk about the Qing's triumphs, or more specifically its crippling weaknesses, how did the dynasty begin and take power from its predecessor, the Ming dynasty? The Ming was effectively defeated by Li Zicheng's peasant rebellion in 1644, resulting in the Qing being let through the Great Wall, defeating that rebellion and seizing power. The dynasty officially began, however, in 1636, as the continuation of the Hou Jin, a state formed by its leader, Nurhaci of the Jurchen ethnic group, who would later become the Manchus, in 1616. Nurhaci, through years of conquest, took control of the Jianzhou Jurchens, annexed the tribes of the Haixi Jurchens, and positioned his armies to take on the waning might of the Ming dynasty. This fight towards the founding of the Hou Jin led by Nurhaci began in 1583, and would take more than 3 decades, in what would be known as the Jurchen unification. The Jurchens were a semi-sedentary society. They practiced hunting and agriculture, harvested crops of wheat and millet, raised horses, and herded animals. They resided in Manchuria, primarily in concentrated settlements along rivers and their basins. There were various tribes over the course of their history, each led by hereditary beilers. These tribes only sometimes unified the cities within their borders, with many city lords frequently skirmishing with each other for influence. The lands these tribes occupied were well forested, covered in awesome mountains, rivers, and more forests, because forests are great. The origins of the Jurchens are said to be with the Mohe people. The Mohe were similar to the later Jurchens, being semi-sedentary and growing crops. There were dozens of Mohe tribes throughout their history, and the direct ancestors to the Jurchens were the Haixi Mohe, a group located along the lower banks of the Amur River, roaming from the modern-day Outer Manchuria to Heilongjiang province. As horses were rare during their time, they most likely rode reindeer, which is an interesting fact. Eventually, during the Tang dynasty, the Haixi Mohe were renamed Nuzhen or Jurchen. Over the centuries, Jurchen tribes began to pay tribute to whichever power, usually Chinese or Korean, had gained influence over them, or whichever was more convenient for their survival. By the 11th century, the Jurchens were paying tribute to either the Goryeo in the south, or the Liao dynasty in the west. Jurchen tribes often switched their allegiance opportunistically, both for political reasons and the desire for outside materials. In 1115, a group of Jurchens led by Aguda of the Wenyan tribe rebelled against the Liao dynasty, resulting in the creation and subsequent domination of the Qin dynasty. The Jurchens of the Qin era weren't the most considerate of human life, but thankfully Chinggis Khan and his even less considerate of human life Mongol Empire came and conquered the Qin, with the conquest ending in 1234. During the Mongol-led Yuan dynasty, most of the Jurchens, those who had not integrated into the Chinese culture, returned to their semi-sedentary lifestyle. The Yuan more or less directly controlled the Jurchens, imposing taxes on them and suppressing their rebellions. In 1351, the Red Turban rebellions broke out due to Yuan mismanagement and natural disasters, resulting in the founding of the Ming dynasty in 1368. After the Yuan dynasty fell, Manchuria remained under the control of Mongol remnants of the northern Yuan, through a former official of Yuan, Nagachu. As Nagachu's power grew, the Ming elected to launch their own invasion rather than wait to be attacked. In 1387, the Ming sent an army of 200,000 soldiers under General Feng Sheng, which by the end of the campaign after crossing the Liao River, laid siege to the Mongol stronghold of Jinshan. Meanwhile, Ming's forces inflicted much destruction to portions of the Mongol horde in the northern vicinity of the Great Wall. Nagachu and his Mongol horde soon surrendered, but lesser Mongol chieftains regarded his surrender as a defection and continued to resist the Ming. These chieftains would go on to carry the northern Yuan remnants to the 17th century. After taking Manchuria, Ming policy towards Jurchens took shape. The Ming sought to establish peace with the Jurchen tribes to prevent them from allying with the Mongols or Koreans, which would pose a threat to the border regions. One method they used to promote peace was to win Jurchens over with a regular system of tribute and trade, as regulations for commerce were relatively unformed previously, and the Ming desired coveted Jurchen goods. With these regulations, Jurchens could trade with Chinese markets through established trading cities like Kaiyuan, Tieling, and Fushun, allowing for coveted goods to flow across the border in both directions. Through interacting with the Jurchens, the Ming gained knowledge about the distribution and differences of the various tribes in Manchuria. The Ming organized the Jurchens into three categories: the Jianzhou, Haixi, and Jurchen. The Jianzhou Jurchens mainly inhabited the areas around the border regions of Ming Liaodong and Joseon Korea. They included the major tribes of Sukusuhu, Hunhe, Jurchen, Wanyan, Dongge, Yalu, Neyin, and Zhushili. The tribes of Jianzhou were more or less connected in the early Jianzhou Confederation, but tension amongst opportunistic chieftains would soon lead to its dissolution. The western Jianzhou tribes were the most technologically advanced Jurchen states, due to their close access to Chinese and Korean markets. The Haixi Jurchens resided to the north of Jianzhou, ranging from the basin of the Songkhua River to the Mongol tribes of the west. They referred to the states of Yehe, Hada, Ula, and Huifa. These federations were often favored by the Ming, though border clashes still occurred. In 1548, Huang Taiji of Hada formed the Hulun alliance, comprising of the four tribes. The Haixi, although Jurchen, were influenced by Mongol culture and were sometimes viewed by their neighbors as part Mongol. The Yeren Jurchens occupied the northern reaches of Manchuria, from Ninguta up to the Amur River basin. These Jurchens were much less organized than their southern counterparts, and were more nomadic, with much less agricultural focus. They comprised of the Donghai and Beishan Jurchens. The Donghai were the primary group of Yeren, and as the Beishan were far in the north, thus having little contact with the Ming, the Yeren as a whole were often referred to as Donghai. The relations that the Ming established with the Jurchens provided them with a way to de-escalate tension between the tribes, so as to reduce conflicts on their borders, and inevitably led them to superseding Korean influence in the region. Although the Jurchens handled their own affairs, even launching raids on Ming settlements, the Ming held ultimate authority over the tribes. Whilst rocky in nature, the standards set between the Ming and Jurchens would go on to last for many decades, until the inevitable re-emergence of the Jurchens' most virtuous of traditions. In the mid-16th century, Wang Gao was leader of the Jianzhou Confederation. Strategical in his leadership, he led his forces to attack and plunder numerous Ming border settlements of Liaodong. In 1557, he attacked Fushun, killed its commander, Peng Wanzhu, and looted the city. This led Ming General Haixi to lead his army to eliminate Wang Gao in response, but his forces were ambushed at Fuxi Mountain, where Haixi was captured and later executed. Subsequently, Wang Gao was emboldened and plundered Liaoyang, Gushan, Fushun, and various small cities, killing many of their commanders. He also engaged the Hada in conflict frequently, as it gradually gained power under Hada Beyla Wang Tai. Due to the frequent killings of Ming officials and raiding of settlements, the Ming court cut off tribute and trade with Wang Gao. This did not deter him, as in 1574 he continued to kill Ming commanders, formed an alliance with the Chahar Mongols, and marched on Liaoyang and Shenyang in a major attack, on the grounds that the Ming cut off the tribute market and trapped his people. Before his force arrived, word got out of his expedition, and Li Chongliang, general of the Liaodong Military Commission, led his army to suppress the invasion, conquering Gule city, where Wang Gao's force was stationed. Li Chongliang, a general of much consideration, promptly beheaded 1,000 captured soldiers. Not satisfied with his defeat, Wang Gao led his troops to invade the border once more, but was again driven back by Li Chongliang in a major counterattack. This defeat resulted in the complete dissolution of the Jianzhou Confederation, paving the way for its tribes to vie for power. Wang Gao escaped, but now in poverty and defeat, he tried to flee north. He did not dare to traverse the Mongol tribes, so he attempted to pass through the Hada tribe. Hada's Beyla, Huang Tai, let Wang Gao in. However, as old enemies, Huang Tai promptly captured him and presented him to the Ming court as tribute. After Emperor Wan Li of Ming personally attended his handover, he was taken back to Beijing, where he was executed in 1575. After Wang Gao's death, his previous subordinates began to struggle for power over the Jianzhou. The most powerful among the contenders were Nikan Wailan of Kulun City, as well as Zhechen and his son Taiko, who was the father of a young Nurhaci. Each made attempts to make good impressions on Li Chongliang, as Ming backing was crucial in order to attain power at the time. Wang Gao's sons, Atai and Ahai, fled back to Gule and Shaji in Sukusuhu respectively, in the hopes of avenging their father. In 1582, they asked Beyla Qingjianu of Yehe to attack Hada, but before an offensive could take place, Li Chongliang caught wind of the plan and led his troops to Staozi Valley and defeated the alliance, killing and capturing 1,500 people and announcing victory in Liaodong. Atai, however, escaped capture and fled back to Gule. In February of 1583, to completely eliminate any further troubles from the Jianzhou, Li Chongliang elected to lead his troops and march 100 miles from Fushun to attack and destroy Gule and Atai's resistance. Nikan Wailan, seeking to expand his power and boost his reputation among the Ming, partially instigated Li's attack, and led the Ming army to Gule as a guide. Word soon got out, and the Jianzhou chieftains were alerted. Nikan Wailan's main competitor, Zhechen, was particularly concerned, as one of his granddaughters was Atai's wife. Knowing the devastation that would happen to Gule should it be conquered, Zhechen and his son Taiko hurried to Gule to try and persuade Atai to surrender to the Ming army. Taiko waited outside the city, and Zhechen went in. Atai promptly refused to surrender, to which Zhechen asked if he could only rescue his granddaughter, which was also refused. Taiko, concerned that it was taking too long, soon entered the city to assist his father. Suddenly, Li Chongliang's force arrived and quickly besieged the city. Gule was situated on a strategic and steep mountain, and was surrounded by sturdy wattle walls, with well-built moats. Li's forces launched repeated attacks on the walls, but each time were driven back by Atai's determined force, who repeatedly exited the city gates to repel the Ming. After 2 days of intense fighting, Li Chongliang withdrew his army and returned to his camp. Li Chongliang, Earl of Ningyuan and General of Liaodong, failed to capture a Jurchen stronghold. That, however, was impossible. Li Chongliang could not lose. Looking to shift the blame for his defeat, he decided to punish Nikan Wailan for losing his men in battle, as he played a part in instigating the battle. Nikan, panicking, volunteered to return to the city to persuade the defenders to surrender, to which he was permitted. After arriving, Nikan shouted, of course lying, that Li Chongliang, general of the army, said that whoever kills Atai will be made master of Gule. Some of Atai's subordinates believed the trick, and quickly killed Atai, before joining Li's forces and opening the gates to the city. Once they were opened, Li Chongliang took the opportunity to be an upstanding general and ordered his troops to storm the city and burn it all to the ground. The army swept through, massacring the population and setting everything alight. During the ensuing chaos, Zhechen and Taiko, who were still in the city, were killed. It is not fully clear on what killed them, but later Qing records believed that they were killed by Ming soldiers under the command of Nikan Wailan, who was looking to eliminate his main rivals, while Ming records believed that they burned to death in the blaze. Most likely, they were killed by Ming soldiers who were already so dead set on killing random people anyway. After hearing the news of his father and grandfather's deaths, the emergent Nurhaci went to Ming border officials and inquired as to why the Ming seemingly had them killed. The Ming sent an envoy to explain that they were mistakenly killed by soldiers and returned his ancestors' remains. As compensation, they gifted Nurhaci 30 imperial edicts, which were useful for commerce, 30 horses, and allowed him to inherit command of Zhechen previous positions, including leader of the Jianzhou left guard, though by this time it was merely a political position with no real authority. Subsequently, Nurhaci's power was limited to that of his own camp at the site of Hotuala. Nurhaci also received a collection of 13 sets of armor left behind by his forefathers, which, although small, would become surprisingly useful to the young leader's ambitions. Upon taking his position of limited power, Nurhaci was quick to request the Ming to arrest Nikan Wailan, who was at the time situated in his city of Tulun in Sukusuhu, and bring him to Nurhaci so that he could be punished for the deaths of Zhechen and Taiko. The border officials of the Ming, however, sternly rejected his request, and warned him that if he ever made such a request again, they would support Nikan as the leader of Jianzhou, which they most likely intended to do anyway. Many tribes believed that the Ming favored Nikan, and promptly submitted to his rule. Nikan, using his heightened influence, attempted to force Nurhaci to surrender to him, but Nurhaci held a strong grudge against him, and refused to submit. Nurhaci was aware that he needed to strengthen his position if he wanted to remain in power. He began to organize his old subordinates and establish a military structure, selecting the notorious Anfeiangu and Oidu as his generals. As Nurhaci could not compete with the Ming directly, he focused the majority of his anger from the events at Gule to Nikan Wailan for the time being. This provided his force with a smaller objective of which to realistically build his strength off of. Later in 1583, Nurhaci formed an alliance with Nomina, lord of Sarhu, Gahashan, lord of Jiamuhu, and the lords of Zhanhe to attack Nikan Wailan together. These lords were all dissatisfied with Nikan for various reasons, so they made a good choice for Nurhaci's ambitions, and each lord swore an oath to resist Nikan. Nurhaci raised an army from his subordinates, making good use of the famed 13 sets of armor left by his ancestors, and led his small force of 100 soldiers alongside his allies to attack Nikan Wailan in Tulun city. Nomina of Sarhu, however, did not come as agreed, as they were persuaded by other lords, and realized that Nikan had strong backing by the Ming, deciding instead not to agree with Nurhaci's plan. Nurhaci and his allies reached Tulun and attacked at night, quickly capturing the stronghold. Nikan Wailan, however, fled to Jiaban before the battle, abandoning his soldiers and people. Though failing to capture his enemy, this was the first battle of Nurhaci's new army, as well as his first military victory. In August, Nurhaci attacked Jiaban. However, once again, Nomina and his brother Naikada of Sarhu, who previously betrayed the alliance, secretly sent envoys to Nikan, who again escaped, with Nurhaci's men in pursuit. Nikan attempted to go to Fushun, but Ming border guards stopped him and did not allow him to enter. Nurhaci's men, upon seeing Ming soldiers, assumed that they were assisting Nikan, so they retreated and set up camp. They quickly realized their mistake, however, and resumed their search. The Jurchens that previously submitted to Nikan Wailan got word of the Ming's refusal to assist him. Subsequently, believing that the Ming was unwilling to support him as ruler of Jianzhou, they rebelled against his authority. With Nikan's power quickly waning, he fled again to Arhun in the Hunhe tribe. Nurhaci failed to capture him again, so he collected Nikan's people and returned to his camp. Nomina's betrayal made Nurhaci resentful. He did not act immediately, as he was limited in strength, but nevertheless he began to plan. Nurhaci soon got his chance. Later in August, Nomina and his brother Naikada arranged with other lords to attack Dongjia and Barda of the Jurchen tribe, and invited Nurhaci. He pretended to agree to the alliance, and decided to defeat Nomina using a trick. Upon reaching Barda, Nurhaci asked Nomina to launch the first attack, but he refused. He then suggested that if Nomina did not wish to attack first, he could lend his military resources, such as swords and spears, to Nurhaci's men, who would then use all the weapons to launch the first attack. Nomina, in all his wisdom, agreed, but after Nurhaci received the weapons, his soldiers immediately used them against Nomina and Naikada, killing them, and left to attack their city of Sarhu, quickly conquering it with little resistance. Fearing that Nurhaci would provoke the Ming, a coalition of Jianzhou city lords joined forces and planned to kill Nurhaci. Led by Li Dai, the lord of Zhaojia, they conspired with Hada forces and plundered Huqi village, which was under the protection of Nurhaci. Upon learning of the attack, Nurhaci sent his general Anfeiangu to chase them down. His forces ambushed the alliance whilst they were dividing their prisoners, and killed 40 enemy soldiers before the force fled. Anfeiangu brought all the looted people and livestock back to the camp. In January of 1584, Nurhaci launched a counterattack on Zhaojia, as his lord Li Dai assisted the Hada soldiers. During his approach, it was snowing heavily and the Gahar mountains were treacherous to cross. On top of this, Li Dai was informed of Nurhaci's expedition and began to prepare his defense. He was advised by his accompanying relatives to withdraw, but Nurhaci was unwilling to let Li Dai's treachery slide. He led his soldiers to carve steps into the mountains, and pulled the army's horses across with ropes, eventually making it to Zhaojia. Although much of his army was intimidated by Li Dai's prepared defenses, they got to work besieging the fortifications. Li Dai prepared well, but his forces were overwhelmed by Nurhaci's momentum. After repeated attacks, General Yidu personally led a final assault on the city wall, and Zhaojia was conquered. Li Dai was captured, but Nurhaci, unwilling to make more enemies, pardoned him and withdrew his troops. In early 1584, Nurhaci ordered the construction of Ela as his new capital. Although it was not made official until 1587, it would serve as the base for Nurhaci's future conquests. Though he had just recently defended against an incursion against him, Nurhaci was soon prompted to act once more, as the coalition formed against him had one of its members, Samudjan, kill Gahashan, lord of Tiamuhu and Nurhaci's brother-in-law. Nurhaci personally went to retrieve his body, as some of his subordinates were accomplices and refused to do so. Riding into the village Gahashan was killed in, he drew his bow, and proclaimed that those who wanted to kill him should show themselves and fight, but those who did were seemingly too afraid of the armored mustached man, and let him return with the body. The coalition led many assassination attempts against Nurhaci, but not wanting to make more enemies, he often let the courtesans go. However, Nurhaci had grown stronger and decided to avenge Gahashan. In June, Nurhaci personally led 400 soldiers to attack Mardun city, a mountainous stronghold with perilous cliffs on 3 sides, making it difficult to conquer. The city was guarded by the forces of Samudjan and the 2 powerful lords of Jurchen, Jurchen and Bumuni. When Nurhaci reached the city, he ordered his forces to construct 3 chariots to assault the gate. These chariots were essentially wooden shields on wheels that soldiers hid behind. To break through the gate, Nurhaci ordered the chariots forward and attack. They advanced in parallel until the road narrowed, where they split and continued in single file. The chariots reached and besieged the wall, and both sides exchanged archery fire. During the tense assault, the defenders of Mardun destroyed the forward chariot by throwing stones and scrapwood taken from the stronghold. The soldiers of the destroyed vehicle quickly retreated to the second chariot, which was soon also destroyed, forcing the men of both chariots to fall back to the third chariot. There was not enough space for all the troops, however, and they subsequently withdrew the chariot, making sure to keep their heads down. The first assault failed, and the army was unable to attack from above. Nurhaci was close to the stronghold during the assault, and seeing that his men were retreating, he took cover behind a wooden stake and fired his bow at the stronghold's leader, Jurchen, injuring him and killed another 4 Mardun soldiers. This acted as a distraction, allowing Nurhaci to order his army to retreat to a safe position, where he had his army surround the stronghold, preventing its defenders from drawing water. The siege lasted for 3 days, and on its 4th night, Nurhaci noticed the enemy's defenses had slackened along the city's rear cliffs, and quickly took advantage of the situation. He ordered Anfei and Gu to lead the soldiers to climb the cliffs, and managed to breach the walls. Anfei and Gu's troops quickly overran the defenders, thus conquering Mardun. The lords of Jurchen, Jurchen and Bumuni managed to escape with most of their forces, and retreated back to Jurchen. By this point, Nurhaci had consolidated great power over the cities of Sukusuhu, and began to be revered as the effective leader of the tribe. In early 1584, tension was brewing in the Donga tribe to the south. The son of Kurcha Bayan, a major lord of Donga, was killed by bandits during petty quarrels. After receiving differing explanations from Hada envoys and a coalition of Donga city lords, each seeking to swindle payment, Kurcha Bayan went to war against his new enemies. Nurhaci, ever opportunistic, heard about the civil strife in Donga and sought to take advantage of the situation to attack the tribe himself. His generals advised against sending troops so far out at their current strength, but Nurhaci rejected, concluding that if they didn't take the initiative, once the Donga had made their peace, they would become a larger threat and march on the Sukusuhu, as they had done 10 years prior. In September, after persuading his generals, Nurhaci led an army of 500 soldiers to attack Ahai Bayan, the hereditary chief of Donga, in the city of Chijida. Ahai Bayan quickly gathered 400 soldiers to mount a defense, and closed the gates to his city to wait for Nurhaci. He soon arrived, and besieged Chijida, in which his forces set fire to the defense towers and surrounding houses. As the siege dragged on, the defenders grew wary, but just as the city was about to fall, heavy snow fell, causing the unprepared Nurhaci to withdraw his troops. He remained behind with a small force to act as a rear guard for his retreating soldiers, and as the defenders exited the city, Nurhaci's men suddenly emerged from the smoke and defeated them, before returning to the army. On the way back from Chidida, Nurhaci was met by a leader from the Wanyan tribe, Sun Zachin Guangbun. He pleaded with him to send troops to attack and destroy his enemies in the city of Wangkolo, as he was presumably captured previously, later released, and wanted to enact revenge. Nurhaci agreed, as he was already there, and perhaps a little power-hungry. Nurhaci led his army overnight to Wangkolo, but Sun Zachin's nephew, Daidu Morgan, secretly sent an envoy to inform the Lord of Wangkolo of Nurhaci's army. When they heard the news, they gathered their troops in the city and closed the gates. Upon arriving, Nurhaci's forces dug in for another strenuous siege, and set fire to the wall towers and surrounding houses, as with Chidida. Nurhaci climbed onto a surrounding building and joined his men in shooting into the city. A soldier of Wangkolo, named Arguni, managed to shoot Nurhaci in the head, piercing his helmet and injuring him. Nurhaci pulled the arrowhead out, not recommended, and fired it back at the enemy. His position was under heavy fire, but he kept fighting. Another soldier of Wangkolo, Luoke, took advantage of the thick smoke to sneak up and fired an arrow close range, which hit Nurhaci's neck, penetrating his collarbone. Nurhaci again pulled out the arrowhead, ripping more of his flesh out with it. Smart move again. Nurhaci's men saw that he was now seriously injured, and tried to rescue him, but Nurhaci, knowing that it would draw attention, covered his wounds and carefully climbed down himself. Once down, he was so injured from his wounds that he fainted several times, and he had to abandon the siege. Nurhaci ordered a withdrawal and retreated. Later that year, and after his wounds had healed, Nurhaci led his army to attack Wangkolo once more. Due to the prior siege, the city's defenses were heavily damaged, and it fell quickly after the siege began. After Wangkolo fell, the two archers, Arguni and Luoke, were captured. Nurhaci's generals sought to kill them, but Nurhaci instead appointed them as Nyolu Urchin, a high-ranking position, and provided them with generous care. After repeated victories over the Sukusuhu cities and Donga tribe, Nurhaci turned his sword to the Jurchen tribe to his north. His forces had battled those of the tribe on numerous occasions, most notably the troops of Zhechen under Jurchen, but he was yet to put any meaningful dent into their sovereignty. In February of 1585, Nurhaci began his campaign against the Jurchen. He led 100 soldiers to attack Tailangong, quickly capturing the town before moving north to attack Zhechen. Nurhaci's men found, upon arrival, that the city's defenses were well prepared for his relatively small attack, and after some attempted assaults, the army had gained nothing. Subsequently, Nurhaci withdrew south to the newly captured Tailangong. Word quickly got out about Nurhaci's campaign, leading the lords of Zhechen, Dongjia, and Barda, as well as Sahu, who decided to rebel against Nurhaci, to launch a counterattack against his small force, with a combined 400 soldiers of their own. They marched on Nurhaci and met his force near Tailangong, immediately launching an attack. The previously defeated generals from the siege at Mardun, Zhechen Lord Nurshan and Bumuni, rode out to attack Nurhaci's personal position, along with some of their troops. Whilst the two forces fought, Nurhaci rode alone to meet Nurshan and Bumuni. Catching them by surprise, they engaged in a melee. Nurshan managed to cut off the reins off Nurhaci's horse, and Nurhaci in turn swung back and cut off Nurshan's shoulder, causing him to fall off his horse and die. Nurhaci turned back and shot Bumuni, who fell off his horse and died. When Nurshan's men saw their leaders had been killed, they halted the attack in shock. Seeing that he was outnumbered, Nurhaci took advantage of their stupor and ordered his men to dismount and lead their now exhausted horses in retreat. To give the men and horses more time to escape, he led a small detachment in a rearguard action to attempt to fake an ambush. His troops hid amongst the foliage and used extra sets of armor to make themselves appear more numerous. The soldiers previously under Nurshan cautiously approached, but as they had lost their leader, their morale was unstable. Suspecting that an ambush was awaiting them, they decided to cut their losses and withdrew back to their camp. Nurhaci took the remaining horses and men and quickly retreated back to his army. In April of the same year, Nurhaci led an army of 500 cavalry and infantry to again attack the Jurchen army. Due to floods on the way, however, he ordered the cavalry and infantry to return. leaving himself with yet another small force, with only 50 cotton-armored and 30 iron-armored men, a total of 80 soldiers. They nevertheless continued, and when they reached the Hun River, the Jurchen were alerted. The cities of Tumuha, Dongjia, Barda, and Jiefan, as well as the rebellious Sarhu, urgently gathered more than 800 soldiers to repel Nurhaci's force. The cavalry and infantry previously sent back got word of the counterattack and chased after Nurhaci, but could not locate his force. Nurhaci believed that his rear was guarded by this force, but they were unknowingly separated, leaving it unprotected. Before long, the Jurchen army arrived. 800 soldiers were standing on the banks of the Hun River near Jiefan, outnumbering Nurhaci by 10 to 1. Their momentum was fierce, but their plan was mostly to intimidate Nurhaci and wait for his force to tire. Some of Nurhaci's men were afraid at the sight of the enemy and attempted to flee, but Nurhaci angrily scolded them so that they remained in place. Unwavering, Nurhaci personally took his banner and advanced. The enemy made no moves, however, so Nurhaci took the initiative and led 3 other cavalrymen and charged bravely forward, killing 20 soldiers with their horse archery skills. Seeing this, combined with knowing how formidable their opponent had been in previous engagements, the Jurchen army began to feel uneasy. Also seeing this bravery, the rest of Nurhaci's force followed suit, charging towards the Jurchen. The 800-strong army could not resist the charge, and were routed, retreating back over the Hun River and into Jurchen territory. Whilst Nurhaci's men were resting, the rear force he previously sent back arrived, and asked Nurhaci if they should pursue the retreating army. Nurhaci, now exhausted, was angry that they had taken so long to arrive, but nevertheless ordered his men in pursuit, killing dozens of retreating soldiers. Nurhaci, satisfied with his victory, withdrew his troops and returned to his camp. He summed up the Battle of the Hun River, saying that it was a miracle that he had managed to fend off an army 10 times his size. His men were more well equipped than their adversaries, and they had become known for their impressive feats, and it was this reputation that had won him the battle. In September, Nurhaci led his army to attack Antu Guwardzia and the rebellious Sarhu, and fully incorporated them under his rule. The Sukusuhu tribe had now been completely annexed by Nurhaci. In May of 1586, Nurhaci led his army to attack Beihuan in Hunha and conquered the town, extending his reach into the tribe. Later in July, he moved to continue his conquest of the Jurchen and besieged the city of Tumuha. During the battle, a thunderstorm fell, and 2 of his soldiers were killed by a thunderbolt, causing Nurhaci to withdraw. Not long later, however, he returned to Tumuha and conquered the city. Tumuha was located nearby to Arhun city, where his old enemy Nikan Wailan was taking refuge. Nurhaci took advantage of the situation he created in Tumuha and rushed to Arhun. He crossed through to the neighboring tribe overnight and struck Arhun, quickly overrunning the city. A force of 40 soldiers responding to the threat from outside the town were unable to get in before the gates were closed, so they retreated as Nurhaci rode in. Upon taking the town, Nikan Wailan was again nowhere to be found. Nurhaci and his men climbed the city walls to look out for Nikan, and found that one of the 40 soldiers fleeing Arhun was suspected to be Nikan. Nurhaci led a handful of his troops to chase him, but mistakenly ran into the entire 40-man army and entered a desperate fight. During the melee, he was shot by an arrow and seriously injured, being struck 30 times, but still fought with his men and escaped the chaos, killing 8 soldiers. Nurhaci's injuries forced him to return to Arhun, and Nikan had yet again managed to escape, this time making it to Fushun, where he took refuge with the Ming. After returning to Arhun, Nurhaci ordered 6 captured Han people to take a message to the Ming border officials, asking for Nikan to be extradited. In the message, he threatened to conquer the Ming as consequence should they refuse. The Ming had a good laugh at the threats, but nevertheless saw that Nurhaci was gradually gaining power, and Nikan was no longer of any use, so they decided not to give him protection, and relented to Nurhaci. The Ming border official sent an envoy, telling Nurhaci that he could come and get Nikan himself, rather than have the Ming do the work. Nurhaci believed that he was being lured into a trap, but the Ming assured him by telling him to send his soldiers, to whom Nikan Wailan would be handed over. Nurhaci ordered General Jaisa and 40 of his men to capture Nikan Wailan. When they reached Fushun, Nikan attempted to flee, but his escape was prevented by the Ming, and Jaisa beheaded him on the spot. Jaisa's force returned to Fur Allah, and presented the head of Nikan Wailan to Nurhaci. In June of 1587, Nurhaci resumed his fight against the Jurchen and besieged the stronghold of Jiefan. The city had been battered by previous conflicts and quickly fell to the army. Later in August, Nurhaci sent General Ito to attack Barda. When they reached the Hun River, it was flooded, and the army had to resort to pulling themselves and their equipment across with ropes. After crossing, Ito's army prepared to attack Barda at night. To lure the defenders away from his main attack, the general led a small force of his strongest men to breach the wall from the north. The defenders, not suspecting any attack, were caught unprepared and rushed to repel the action. Ito and his men set up siege ladders and began to scale the wall, engaging in heavy fighting, where the general was wounded by an arrow, preventing him from descending. Ito was more intelligent than Nurhaci, and simply cut the arrow so he could climb back down the ladders. Once the defenders of Barda were distracted with repelling his force, he ordered the rest of his army to assault the city head-on from the west. Barda did not have enough troops to hold the attackers off on two fronts, and heavy fighting fell on both sides, until eventually the people of Barda, realizing the danger, fled the city. Ito's soldiers stormed the now undefended walls, finally conquering the city. Later that month, Nurhaci led his army to attack Dongcheng and persuaded its lord, Zhechen, to surrender, to which he agreed without hesitation. This marked the final fight against the Jurchen, after which the Jurchen tribe was completely annexed by Nurhaci. Nurhaci also solidified Fur-Ala as his official capital and announced the formation of national policies and laws for his new state, further consolidating his power over his newfound subordinates. In 1588, Kurchabayin's grandson Huli, now chief of Dongao, along with the lords of Suwan and Diargu, led their armies and civilians to submit to Nurhaci. Nurhaci treated the chiefs who surrendered well and bestowed them with high-ranking positions. From this, he formed the 5 ministers as the head of his new government, comprising of the surrendered Fei Yingdong, Hua Han, and Huli, along with the various generals of Ito and Anfeiangu. Nurhaci next set his sights on the Wanyan tribe and led his army against Wanyan city. On the way there, a large star shot across the sky, so bright that all the horses and soldiers were startled. They advanced and captured Wanyan city, and killed the city lord, Daidu Morgan. With little further resistance, Nurhaci annexed the Wanyan tribe. In 1589, Nurhaci led his army to attack Ninggu Qingzhongjing, the new lord of Zhaojia, and reconquered the city. During the siege, Nurhaci's men were ambushed in a surprise offensive, where 100 of the defenders rushed out towards his force. Nurhaci and his men were able to repel the attack and returned to the siege. It lasted for 4 days before the wall fell, allowing Nurhaci's soldiers to enter the city. A large portion of the men, however, ignored the remaining soldiers in Zhaojia and began to loot its people and resources, arguing amongst each other. Nurhaci saw this and ordered one of his subordinates, Naihu, to reinstate order before they began to kill each other. At that time, a group of soldiers from Zhaojia broke out. Nurhaci's cousin Wang Chan was caught in the fight and was overwhelmed, but Nurhaci saw it and rushed to his rescue, shooting his pursuer in the head. Naihu had meanwhile managed to restore order within the rogue portion of his force, and had the city lord Qingzhongjing beheaded, marking the city of Zhaojia conquered. With all the major settlements of the Hunha tribe now taken, Nurhaci annexed the tribe into his state. Nurhaci was growing close to unifying the tribes of Jianzhou, in fact already controlling the most powerful among them. His next target was the Yalu tribe in the Changbai region. He sent troops under Anfeiangu to attack the Yalu, who quickly conquered it, thus annexing the Yalu tribe. Realizing they would be next, the 2 remaining tribes of Jianzhou, the Neyin and Zhushili tribes, joined forces and marched to attack the settlements on Nurhaci's eastern border. When Nurhaci's generals heard about this, they went to inform their leader, but Nurhaci refused to act and let them take the towns, as the 2 armies of Zhushili and Neyin would eventually be theirs, and there was little reason to rush to conquer them. Subsequently, the joint armies took the eastern towns with little resistance and returned victorious. By 1589, Nurhaci had grown from a small army of 13 sets of armor and 100 men at the beginning of his campaign to one of the powerful Jurchen forces with more than 15,000 soldiers under his rule. During the years that Nurhaci was unifying the Jianzhou, Li Chengliang, general of Liaodong, concentrated the Ming's main forces north to deal with the Haixi, Jurchens, and Mongols of the northern Yuan. The Yehe and Hada suffered 3 consecutive heavy losses against the Ming, and their leaders were killed. Li Chongliang's own army, however, also suffered heavy casualties. This objectively reduced several threatening external interferences for Nurhaci's unification and establishment of his Jianzhou state, allowing him to roam fairly uncontested for a time. In 1592, Toyotomi Hideyoshi led the recently unified forces of Japan to invade Joseon, Korea, sweeping across its entire territory within a few months. Joseon requested aid from the Ming, who sent them reinforcements. After paying tribute to the Ming for horses, Nurhaci heard about the invasion on his southern border. He also heard that General Kato Kiyomasa had led an army across the Tumen River and was invading the southern tribes of the Donghai Jurchens. Nurhaci believed that if Japan occupied Korea, it would proceed into and invade Jianzhou. In response to Kato's invasion, he offered the Ming and Joseon aid, claiming that he had 30,000 troops and cavalry, all of whom were brave and used to fighting. The Ming, however, refused, and after discussion between King Soncho of Joseon and his ministers, they believed Nurhaci would take the opportunity to ally with Japan to eliminate the Haixi. The Koreans, considering it dishonorable and potentially dangerous to seek help from barbarians from the north, sternly refused Nurhaci's offer. During the 6 years of the Ming's expeditions into Korea, Liaodong was short of troops, which yet again objectively provided Nurhaci with an opportunity to fight the tribes of Haixi. Nurhaci started his military career with little power, so the Beilers of Haixi always despised him, as they believed that they had accumulated their own prestige and reputation through that of their ancestors. However, Nurhaci had grown his influence much since he began, and the gradual increase in strength of Jianzhou finally caused the Haixi Beilers to feel uneasy. Yehe Bela Nalambulu and other Beilers tried to form marital ties with Nurhaci, but to no avail. Subsequently, the Hulun Confederation, headed by Yehe, began to extort Nurhaci several times, trying to force him to cede land to their tribes, so as to limit the expansion of Jianzhou, but these attempts were sternly rejected by Nurhaci. In June of 1593, seeing that intimidation and coercion were ineffective against Nurhaci, Nalambulu gathered the soldiers of Haixi to attack and pillage Jianzhou's borders. Upon hearing the news of the attack, Nurhaci led his troops to meet the Haixi army, and met the forces of Hada under Bela Mungabulu at Fuarjiachi in Hada's territory. Nurhaci defeated Mungabulu's forces in battle, and forced them to retreat. Hada reinforcements soon arrived, and Nurhaci withdrew back to Jianzhou. To ensure his withdrawal, he personally guarded the army's rear. In the ensuing action, Nurhaci shot a pursuer's horse, before his own mount was suddenly frightened, and Nurhaci fell to the ground. 3 Hada cavalrymen took the opportunity to cut at Nurhaci, but he was rescued after General Anfeongu appeared, killing the 3 soldiers. Nurhaci and his men continued to fight, and shot Mungabulu's own horse, causing him to officially commandeer a subordinate's mount and order a retreat. Nurhaci's army returned victorious once again to Fur-Ala. The Beilers of Haixi could not accept the failure at the Battle of Fuarjiachi, so they made the decision to launch another, much larger invasion. In September of 1593, Yehe Bela Nalambulu and his brother Bujai, leaders of the Hulun alliance, formed a coalition comprising of 9 tribes: the Yehe, Hada, Hula, Weifa of the Haixi, the Jurchen, Shiba, and Gulecha of the Mongols, and the Juchurli and Nuyin tribes of the Changbai Jianzhou, aiming to attack Jianzhou from 3 directions. The coalition, with a combined force of 30,000 soldiers, stationed at their base camp on the north bank of the Hun River, and advanced towards the Draka Pass and Gule Mountain. When Nurhaci heard about the large invasion force, he swiftly gathered his forces and arranged his defense carefully. His plan was to take the high ground, send small detachments to lure portions of the enemy forces deep into Jianzhou territory, and launch ambushes on their divided or cornered armies. Due to its defensive capabilities, Nurhaci stationed most of his forces at the old fortress of Gule Mountain, and notably went to sleep. Nurhaci sent Uli Khan to investigate the situation, who returned with a captured soldier of Yehe. After interrogation, it was learned that the invading army had a strength of 30,000 soldiers, twice the number of available Jianzhou troops of 15,000. This news made many of Nurhaci's men tremble. Nurhaci believed that although the enemy had more troops, there were many leaders, and the army's deployment was chaotic. As long as one or two of their leaders were injured, the armies of those respective leaders would become demoralized and withdraw, leading to a collapse in fighting spirit across the nine-part coalition, thus ending in defeat. The coalition army besieged Jaka city, but the siege was unsuccessful. The army was blocked by the numerous obstacles and defenses set up by the Jianzhou army along the way, and its head and tail were like several long snakes trailing to the foot of Gule mountain. Nurhaci consolidated his troops at Gule, the apparent battleground, and led his men to set up battle arrays in defensible positions around the mountain, laying logs and stones to roll down the mountain and cripple the oncoming attackers. Meanwhile, the coalition commanders Bujai and Nalimbulu launched a continuous attack on Hejik city, and both sides suffered heavy casualties. Nurhaci sent General Oyidu to lead 100 elite cavalrymen to Hejik city and lure the enemy towards the defensive position, and at the same time ordered the defenders of Gule to prepare for an ambush. Soon after Oyidu arrived at Hejik, he engaged the besiegers before feigning a retreat. Bujai, unaware of the trick, led his army in pursuit to the foot of Gule mountain. The majority of the coalition forces turned their backs on the Hun River to join the advance, and soon the army began to arrive at Gule mountain from the north. The invaders quickly got to work and proceeded onward to the defenses. As Nurhaci had guessed, the coalition forces were somewhat disorganized, as they were divided amongst their various leaders, and advanced in separate columns, struggling to coordinate attacks on the steep cliffs along Nurhaci's flanks. This resulted in one large consolidated attack against Gule, giving the Jianzhou army an easy opportunity to cripple their foe in detail. As the coalition advanced up the mountain, the Jianzhou troops used their advantageous position and ambushed the attackers. They launched the logs and large stones down the mountain, and Oyidu's force turned around and joined the ambush, attacking the army's flanks. Threatened on all sides and confined to the narrow mountain passes, the coalition's situation quickly became critical. The mountain was steep, and especially amongst the heavy fighting, there was little room left to respond, allowing the Jianzhou army to effectively obliterate the foe in a near one-sided manner. Bujai, co-leader of the coalition forces, was unable to dodge the rolling logs and was tripped off his horse. A Jianzhou warrior, Wu Tan, saw this and immediately killed Bujai. Nalimbulu fainted after seeing his brother killed and was hurriedly rescued by his subordinates. The coalition forces fell into chaos and disarray after losing both of their commanders, and the attacking army was completely routed. Their retreat led to a chain reaction across the army, causing tens of thousands of soldiers to flee in panic, but they were crowded on the narrow mountain roads, and their retreat was in chaos. Jurchen Bela Mingan, whose horse was stuck in the mud, officially commandeered a subordinate's horse and escaped in a hurry, seemingly a pastime of Bela's. Seeing that the enemy had been completely routed, Nurhaci took advantage of the situation and ordered his forces to charge the retreating enemy. The Jianzhou army rushed down from the mountain and annihilated the coalition army, killing many troops. The coalition forces were defeated terribly. Many leaders, including Bujantai, brother of Ulabela Mantai, were captured alive. The Jianzhou army pursued the enemy all the way to the Huifa tribe, and it was not until dark that Nurhaci withdrew his troops and returned to Fur Allah. In total, the Jianzhou army killed more than 4,000 soldiers of the coalition forces, including the Belas of Yeha, captured Bujantai and others, and seized over 3,000 war horses, winning a great victory. Jianzhou casualties are unknown, or rather omitted by the Qing for boasting purposes, but they probably numbered in the hundreds. The disastrous defeat of the nine-tribe coalition changed the balance of power between the Jianzhou and Haixi Jurchens, leading to the subsequent demise of Haixi, albeit eventual. Nurhaci became famous from the Battle of Gule, and people far and near were intimidated. The Ming bestowed him with the political rank of Commander-in-Chief of Jianzhou, and the second rank Dragon and Tiger General. The battle also severely weakened the Neyin and Zhushili tribes, leading Nurhaci to send an army to conquer the latter in October, annexing the Zhushili. With one tribe of the Jianzhou remaining, in November of 1593, Nurhaci ordered the generals of Oyidu and Feiangu and Gagai to lead 1,000 troops to besiege the cities of Fudo and Shanchong in Neyin. After 3 consecutive months of attack, in January of 1594, the Jianzhou army conquered the cities and killed their leaders. Thus, Nurhaci had annexed the last Jianzhou tribe. 10 years after he launched his campaign of unification in 1583, he had brought his entire country under his rule. The time following the Battle of Gule was imbued with the transition of power between the Jurchens, though without all that much conflict, but would remain tense until 1599, where Nurhaci would begin his campaign against the states of the Haixi Jurchens. In conquering all of Manchuria, Nurhaci's power would only continue to grow, and in 1616 he would go on to found his true state, the Hou, or later Qing Dynasty, from which he would set his sights on his primary objective, and take on the waning might of the Ming Dynasty.